Good day everyone, I am Jelly Padilla Makachag from BS Ed 1C and I am the assigned leader of the Group 1. My groupmate ended up discussing the universal sound Baby Talk by Sir Ariel Ordonio, the phonology and the English sound by Sir PJ Eco, the phonological interferences by Ma'am Maria Katrina Palarca. So in this video, we are going to talk about the categorical perception, which is one of the fundamental concepts we want to be familiar within speech perception. And also, we are going to talk about the morphology and phonology. So without any further delay, let's begin. Category perception. The main idea is that perception reflects category membership rather than the continuous physical differences. Categorical perception, through the grouping of like items along a continuum, affect how things such as language, music, and faces are perceived. So in this lesson, we will learn about categorical perception and how it actually changes the way we hear and see certain things. This particular lesson focuses on categorical perception in speech. Let's have an example of categorical perception first. When someone speaks a language that you don't speak, you of course don't understand the meaning of what they say. But did you know that you actually hear different sounds than what a native speakers of the language hears? Take for example the L and R sounds of the English language. While native English speakers easily distinguish these two sounds, Japanese speakers are generally unable to hear the difference. Why? The English words lag and rag would sound the same to them. Likewise, there are sounds that English speakers are unable to distinguish, such as the T and T sounds in Hindi. The reason has to do in part with a trick of the brain called categorical perception. So this categorical perception help us to detect the differences between things when we need to be able to, and it masks the differences when we need to treat things as the same. The Japanese language doesn't differentiate between the L and R sounds. So through categorical perception, the brains of native Japanese speakers have learned to treat the two sounds as the same by actually hearing the same sound when each is spoken. However, because those sounds are differentiated in English, changing the L in the lag to an R will change the meaning of the word. Native English speakers have learned to hear a difference between the two. So what is the definition of categorical perception? Simply put, categorical perception occurs when items that range along a continuum are perceived as being either more or less similar to each other than they really are, because of the way they are categorized. For example, if items falling within a certain range along the continuum belong to a single category, they will be perceived as being more similar to each other than items outside of that range. Categorical perception of speech sounds. Categorical perception was first demonstrated with speech sounds such as ga, pa, and ju. Researchers were trying to make sense of the fact that humans understand speech at all when there is so much variability in how different speakers pronounce speech. For example, when your friend says the word dog, it is going to be pronounced slightly differently from how your mom says the word dog. Yet each time, you will still hear the same dog despite the variability. What's even more interesting is that you likely never even notice the variability. Some speech sounds differ only by voice onset time, or the VOT. VOT is the time it takes for the vocal cords to start vibrating after the release of certain consonant sounds. For example, the sound da differs from ta only in the amount of time it takes for the vocal cords to vibrate after making the consonant sound. Give it a try. Make the sound da and then the sound ta. Did you notice how it takes longer for the A sound to come out with the ta than it does what da? In fact, the VOT for the da ranges from about 0 to 30 milliseconds, and the VOT for the ta runs from about 50 to 80 milliseconds. Take a look on this. You can see that if the VOT is between 0 to 30 milliseconds, people report that they hear da. But if the VOT is 50 to 80 milliseconds, they report hearing ta. In here, notice how there is a range of milliseconds for each sound. What researchers find is that it doesn't really matter what the VOT is within that range. Listeners will hear the same sound regardless. Da with a VOT of 10 milliseconds is going to sound like the same da with a VOT of 30 milliseconds. But increase that VOT to 50 milliseconds and suddenly you have ta. So now, let's proceed to our next topic, which is the morphology and phonology. Morphological and phonological processes are tightly interrelated in the spoken production. During processing, morphological process must combine the phonological content of individual morphemes to produce a phonological representation that is suitable for driving phonological processing. Phonology is the study of the patterns of basic speech units and the accepted rules of pronunciation within a language. The smallest units of sounds that make up a language are called phonemes. Phonemic and phonological awareness are two featured skills of phonology that should be applied to language instruction. Phonemic awareness is the ability to segment words into their sounds units. Phonological awareness is the ability to hear and manipulate words, syllables, and phonemes. Children acquire the ability to identify and play with words and syllables before they can do the same with individual sounds. This initiates pre-reading skills, as phonemic awareness is a subset of phonological awareness. Both are closely related to emergent literacy skills. Language instruction that includes phonology can provide a strong predictor of English reading success when applied to language instruction. Morphology is the study of the smallest units of meaning called morphemes. Knowledge of the morphology of our language is critical to vocabulary development and reflects the smallest building blocks for comprehension. Language instruction that includes morphology influences the student's ability to understand what word means. Why phonology and morphology? If you are working with English learners who are struggling, you may make the wrong assumptions about a student if you forget to consider English phonology and morphology. For example, you could think students have a learning disability for that they were not taught well in their primary language. Let's take two examples to understand the importance of phonology and morphology. An Arabic speaker sees the word park but pronounces it as bark. This is because the letter P is not part of the Arabic alphabet. Similarly, as Spanish speakers gets ready to write the words the teacher says, when the learner hears the word space, the writer may write space spells as E, S, P, E, I, S. These examples demonstrate why phonology, the system of sounds in language, and morphology, the form of word in a language, are important for English learners. If you teach phonology to students, you can prevent them from feeling confused by English sounds that do not necessarily exist their primary language. Similarly, if you teach morphology, you prevent learners from confusions due to the fact that sounds do not always exactly match what is written in their primary language. Understanding phonology can help meet the communication needs of students learning English because it focuses on oral language and promotes literacy, oral and written. Understanding morphology can help meet the communication needs of students learning English because morphological word study that provides chances to explore word parts and their meaning can increase the development of a student's vocabulary. The more vocabulary a student knows, the better he or she will be able to communicate.